Hi, I'm Liv. Join me as I ad-lib my way through stories from the vaults, unsolicited sarcasm, bewitching wisdom, and creative insight on how to become our greatest work of art. Here we will discover our wildest and most unscripted selves. Yes, that self, the one that was never meant to be tamed. Hello, welcome to another episode of Adlib with Liv. I'm your host, Liv. Welcome to the podcast. Coming to you on October 27th, which is, I didn't know this until I went to my nail girl today, but the 27th is usually when people start to set their altar for Dia de Muertos, a week. So you have a week to invite your ancestors, your lost loved ones, into your space because you've set an altar for them. So here's my altar next to me. If you're listening to the podcast, you are missing out on a beautiful little scene, but you can jump over to my YouTube and see it for yourself. And it's basically an homage and an offering to all my loved ones. And I actually was on my way after I got my nails done. I was on my way to get all the flowers and to get a few of like the little sweet treats that you set on the altar to offer to your loved ones. So it was perfect. I was like, okay, I must be Mexican already. It must be hitting because I knew subconsciously that today was the right day to set my ofrenda. So it was a really sweet experience. Of course, I sat and broke down and cried and just pictured each member of my family and my circle coming to sit at a chair that I put out for them next to this altar filled with marigolds and terciopelos, which are these velvety red flowers. And I chose these gorgeous little white. They remind me of baby's breath, but here they're called nubes, which means clouds. And I chose those for some of the younger people that I've lost because they just really represent innocence and this preciousness of life. And I have dozens of candles, a beer for my grandfather with his favorite nuts and sweet treats, little mini pan de muertos and donuts. And yeah, I have a photo of my grandmother Shirley, who is my angel, my ride or die angel. She's always on my back. She's like my wings in this life. So she's right in the center. And then I brought sweet candies for my young cousin Will, who passed. And I also chose these purple red flowers for my cousin Mallory, who also passed at way too young of an age. So what else? Oh, and I also brought an orange and an avocado for my cousin Will because he would never ever pick that up. He would pick up the giant swirly lollipop, but just to give him some extra nutrition, I brought those for him. And then I actually pulled 3 tarot cards this morning, and one for three of the people that I'm choosing to remember. And I placed those cards on the altar just as a message to myself to connect to them. And yeah, it was a really lovely experience. And I mean, what's so special if you have been to Mexico for Dia de Muertos, you know the ofrendas that people make are next level incredible. I mean, they take thousands, that literally thousands of marigolds that are grown all over Mexico. These ones were grown in Puebla, the marigolds, the cempasúchils, they call them in Zapotec, and they fill their house with these. They also fill the archways of storefronts and bars and restaurants. And right now, the Zocalo in Mexico, downtown Mexico City, which is like the main square, has millions of marigolds like laid out on the ground. So it's just this really beautiful symbol of the holiday. And I'll get into some of the symbology and stuff during this episode. But yeah, it's a really cool time to be here. I went to the market earlier and I just walked in and was hit with the aroma of marigolds, which is a really fragrant, earthy, floral scent. And then everybody was selling like these homemade little pan de muertos. They're so, so cute. They're made from pepitas, which are the seeds of a pumpkin, and they make these little, they almost look like marzipan candies. You know how some people mold marzipan into be little designs? So they apparently use pepitas, and then they make like mini foods, little mini breads, and hand paint them, and they're absolutely precious. So I bought a little bag of those. They also have papel picada, which is this beautiful paper. I don't think you can see it in the video, but it's they take this really thin, almost like paper mache kind of paper, and they cut these beautiful scenes in them, different scenes of like people at the cemetery with their loved ones, or, the ancestors walking, from the spirit world to come greet us. And it's just very common to see the papel picada, which is just cut up paper, all over the city. In Oaxaca, they string them from one side of the street to the other, and they're so gorgeous, and they use every color. And so that's my altar. Very excited about it. I am, if an ancestor comes and takes a seat next to us during this episode, I'm going to have to put this on pause and take a moment, because, I mean, hello. Always want a moment with the dead. Okay, I know I already started the episode, but I have to give my random rant, which maybe is a new segment of the podcast. Random rants, or this entire thing maybe is a random rant. No, these are specific to like what's happening in my life at the moment. So let's talk about sound baths. Sound bath, I think the first one I ever went to was in LA, and I'm used to a very epic sound bath. The ones that I've been to have had gongs that reach the ceiling, hundreds of sound bowls. You might have two, three, four, five people who are playing instruments the entire time. So it's a full body experience. The vibration is so intense that it like ripples through your body. It's gorgeous. It puts you into a trance. You get very heavily meditated. You can get super sleepy, and it can also be a bit stimulating. Like it can get your creative juices going. It can kind of wake you up and kind of activate some parts of yourself. So I've been going to them here in Mexico City, and they're much more tranquilo. One person who's hosting the event, and they have 10 bowls out maximo, and they play for you, and it's usually like a small group of people. Like the most I think I've had is like 10 or 15 people. So it's an intimate space, so you're like connected with everybody there. So I go to this one tonight, and I'm on my period, and all I want to do is just lay down, cover myself in a blanket, and be serenaded. I pretty much can't do anything else. I ran a 10K this morning, don't ask me why, and I'm on my cycle. And so I'm exhausted. I'm shocked I'm doing this episode, TBH. So I get there, and we're sitting upright, and we do a meditation for 20 minutes, and I am aggravated beyond belief. I mean, it's taking everything in me not to curl up into the blanket and just be the only one laying down. But the guy's taking it so seriously. He's doing a visualization. We're going to the Fountain of Miracles. It's beautiful, but I'm just not in the mood to be meditating like that. For me, visualization is super powerful. I can usually drop in and I'll be at the Fountain of Miracles. I'll be bathing in that water. Trust me. But not tonight. No, I was not bathing in any fucking miracle. I wanted to lay down. Anyways, after 20 minutes, we drop in, and right away, two tapetas down, there is a man who is breathing and making sounds that I cannot not hear. The space is dead silent except for the maestro who's playing the sound bowls, and this one man who is on the verge of snoring himself awake. And so I just wanted to say that if you have diagnosed or undiagnosed sleep apnea, please do not come to a sound bath, okay? I am paying to experience the sound of, I don't know, when they ring it around the big one really, really loudly, it goes into this high vibrato that sounds like Ariana Grande's high note, and it's almost like difficult to tolerate, but it's actually like hits this high vibration that your body and soul needs, and then you just melt into it. I came for that sound, okay? Not this man who is choking on his own breath. I am so sorry, sir. If you require a CPAP, you can't come to a sound bath. And I know that's not very nice. I know that's not inclusive. But truly, no, thank you, sir. No, it's not all men, but it's always a man. I couldn't have left the studio faster. So on my bike ride home, everything that could have happened except for me like actually being in an accident. So there's a bike lane next to the car lanes, and I'm behind a guy who's on the left side. It's the same as passing someone driving a car. You pass on their left. Once you're done passing people, you go to the right and you stay in the right. That's how it is. Everybody has bells too. So we ding, ding, ding each other to let other people know where we're at. So I'm behind this guy who's so committed to the left lane. He is like not budging. And I start dinging and he's not responding. And then another guy comes up behind me and he starts he dings. And then I ding, and then the other guy dings, and him and I are going back and forth, and like neither of us are looking at each other or saying anything, but we're jamming with our bells, and this guy isn't listening to us. So finally that guy passes him on the right, I pass him on the right, and I just told him, "Hey man, we pass on the left," and he was like, "Oh, okay." And then not 5 seconds later, I run into another guy, and I am dinging like I've never dinged before. Nothing. In fact, he's like staying even more to the left. So I think, okay, he doesn't even know that this is like a passing situation. So as I pass him on the right, I look over and he's got headphones in, and I look at him and I kind of start telling him off. I'm like, "Hey, excuse me, it's good to pass on the left. Like, could you not hear me?" And he didn't hear a word I said. So I just made this signal and then like kind of brushed him off. And then I get backed into by a guy selling coconuts on his cart, and he just backs up into me as I'm sitting there at a red light. And then a mother and a baby are walking into the bike lane as I'm zipping down, and I just start dinging, and like I don't want to freak her out, but like I'm already cruising. Like it's more dangerous for me to try to slam on my brakes and then potentially hit her. Anyways, she has an infant in her arms. I'm like, "Oh, God bless." So I ding and I smile and keep on cruising. And then as I'm like right around the corner to my house, I'm I'm in the middle of the street and there's no bike lane, and it's a neighborhood that I'm in, so it's a little more loose. And I see 10 nuns, and they're crossing that road, and normally that they would see me and they would stop immediately, but I saw them and I put on my little brakes and just waved to them and said, "Pásale." And they all smiled at me and just, slowly walked across the road. And they were older nuns. And it just made me laugh because I will slam on my brakes for the nuns. Okay. Jesus walked on water so those nuns could walk across that street in peace. Okay, let's get into the episode. Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead, is celebrated in Mexico. Is actually kind of a festival of paradoxes, as my friend Fernando would say. He's a Mexican photographer who knows the holiday very well and has been documenting it through photography for years. And so I did an article with him a long time ago, probably 5 years ago at this point. And we did a whole story on Day of the Dead and what it means to people here in Mexico. And he says it's a festival of paradoxes, a mix of music and enjoyment for some, while others attend cemeteries for a scene of deep affection and respect. It's also the modern celebration of Dia de Muertos has really been influenced by the Spanish conquistadors who brought the Catholicism to Mexico, and it's kind of a blend of All Saints Day and All Souls Day, but those traditions are actually blended with Aztec traditions that were here way before the conquistadors ever came. And I think that's a really important piece because the parts of Dia de Muertos that I really resonate with are the parts that came before some of the Catholic symbology swept on through. I'll share some of the info from this article because it's really great. There's an indigenous Zapotec community called Teotitlan del Valle, which is in Oaxaca. And the Zapotec, for those who don't know, is an indigenous group of people many of whom occupied what is now modern day Oaxaca. The Zapotec have lived in the valley of Oaxaca in the southern highlands of central Mesoamerica since 500 BCE and still inhabit parts of Oaxaca and bordering states. So when you go to Oaxaca to celebrate, when you go outside of the main city, that's where you feel the energy. That's where you feel the spirits. One of my favorite excerpts from the article is Fernando talking about his experience with Day of the Dead as a young boy. There were, abuelas cooking steaming tamales, traditional breads, mole, and mezcal savored in the glow of candlelight as copal smoke snakes through the air. His grandfather, who had Spanish origins, passed down generational wine and bread-making traditions. I remember he had his wood oven and a huge canoe to knead the dough by hand while he smoked his cigar. And my grandmother made black mole and pumpkin candy for the season. For a long time, I have photographed all kinds of celebrations for the holiday, and each time I lean more towards intimate moments that contain the idiosyncrasies between indigenous people and death. Fernando is drawn to these muerte rituals, these death rituals, for they invite a more contemplative experience of the impermanence that is life. And this is so captivating to me because part of the reason that Mexicans have such a passion for living and for laughing and for loving and for cooking and enjoying and being and just enjoying all good things in life, because they really do. I mean, any culture that is food obsessed and brings people together because of food, which yes is most cultures, but not every culture has the same like passion for like specific ingredients and bringing people together over and like always centering food at every experience or gathering. And so to see that in real life makes you wonder where that passion for living comes from and where that presence to every experience comes from. Someone who sums this up the best is this concept of balancing life and death in Mexican culture is Guillermo del Toro. He is, oh my God, he's so famous, you guys. He's done everything. I didn't even realize this, to be honest. Pan's Labyrinth, Frankenstein, the new one, 2025, The Shape of Water, which is, I believe that one is Oscar winning, and many others. So he's an incredible filmmaker, author, artist. And my friend sent me this clip of him answering a question about how he can find joy while he's also exploring death in his work. And this is what he had to say.
Into the darker side of human nature and fantasy and terror, but you also are a really joyful and loving person. So how do you find that balance?
I'm Mexican, and you know, no one loves life more than we do in a way, because we are so conscious about death. So the preciousness of life, standing side to side to the one place we're all going through. Let's say everybody in this planet boarded a train that was final destination death. So the train, we're gonna live. We're gonna have beauty and love and freedom. And I think that when you eliminate one of the two sides from the equation, it's a pamphlet. When you take in account the dark to tell the light, it's reality.
Snaps for Guillermo. I get emotional when I hear that because I just feel like it's such a privilege to be here in Mexico. And I moved to Oaxaca last year, and that for me was such a gift. I felt very, very privileged to be there. I felt like I was walking on sacred ground. Oaxaca specifically, because it's not as developed and not as commercial as Mexico City, for example, especially compared to like other parts of Mexico that I had been, which had been more coastal communities that have been severely gentrified. And I felt a disconnect to the actual spirit of the place. And I think Oaxaca still has maintained this connection to their culture. I could do a whole episode on the artists and the creatives that are creating today and how they're bridging ancient history from their ancestors, grandparents, the revolutionaries of Mexico, and also creating contemporary art that reflects what's currently going on and political social issues, and how they can on it's just my point is that they make space for both. And I think Guillermo's quote also really highlights that there is a place that when you are so aware of what can be gone and the fragility of it all, you lean into life more. And I think that's what our ancestors are here to tell us. I had a really intense ayahuasca ceremony, and I mean, when is it not an intense ayahuasca ceremony? That seems intense doesn't seem like a necessary word there. I had an ayahuasca ceremony, and of the many things that I learned, one of them was this message that came through while I was staring out at a hibiscus plant, the window covered in glittering moonlight. And I was told that my ancestors or these other spirits out there that I felt very connected to, said, we didn't work this hard, we didn't suffer this much for you to not be in joy. And that message came through when I was in a state of depression and very much apathetic towards life. And that message came through, and I just leaned into that. And within a year and a half, I had made my way to Mexico to be in like the place where joy exists on every corner. Also, not a lot of joy. I think you can't talk about Mexican culture as it is now, contemporary culture, because that's what I'm experiencing, without talking about the tragedies and the problems and the disparity that is absolutely apparent, especially once you get outside, just a little bit outside of the burbujas, the bubbles that are very aesthetic and very gentrified. So Mexico also carries a lot of duality when it comes to the way people live and experience life, which is a conversation that I would like to bring in a Mexican for. I don't think I'm the right person to speak on that. And nor do I have like the background or the experience to understand the full extent of some of these issues. But that's an episode for the future. Let's talk about the magic of Dia de Muertos. Ay, 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 ay. I love it so much. I came to Oaxaca 2 years ago. My friend Mel and I were like, we have to do Dia de Muertos in Oaxaca. This is like epic. This is necessary. We met in Mexico City for a couple nights, had a really fun couple of nights in the city, and we actually got to see some of the ofrendas, some of the alebrijes that line Reforma. But our goal was to get to Oaxaca. So we land there, and we actually met up with my brother, Jack, and his partner, Stephanie, whose family is from Villa Alta, which is about 3 hours outside of Oaxaca City. So she was born in the States, and a lot of her family resides in the US, in Colorado, California. But her father is from Villa Alta, and so she had been to Oaxaca before, and she has these Zapotec roots. And I was so excited to not only be with one of my best friends, but to be able to celebrate with Jack and Steph, because with somebody who's from there is just a very different experience, because you start to see it through their eyes. And even though Steph was raised in the States, her lineage is Mexican. And so her connection to traditions and to culture, I believe, is something that lives within you. It doesn't always have to be expressed or honored every day, or even something that you haven't been exposed to throughout your childhood or life. You can still tap into it. And, Steph is a very sensitive soul who I just knew she'd be able to tap into this experience. So her family has a house in Oaxaca, so we got to crash with them, which was so nice. And Mel and I kick off the experience. We decide to do a full Dia de Muertos day. So we book a really cool Airbnb experience, which is super touristy. I'll just preface it with this. But I was down to do it with her. If there was anyone I was going to do it with, it would be, a close girlfriend. I was like, because normally I would opt out of that stuff and I would try to go find my own, connection. The experience was hosted by a local family. It didn't feel like it was catered to be this experience that was to like appease what we thought of Day of the Dead. It was actually we were actually just invited into this family's life and how they would actually celebrate the holiday. And we got to go to the marigold fields in the morning, these gorgeous fields with hundreds and hundreds of marigold flowers planted, and they grow these for the season. And I mean, we saw it like, we technically saw it kind of late because they've already been picking the marigolds to build up to Dia de Muertos, because I think this was the 31st that we celebrated. A lot of people had already picked a lot of the flowers, but if you go earlier, you can see millions of marigolds planted and you're in a sea of gold. And then we went to the family's home. We were with a group of about like 10 other people. The favorite part was learning how to make homemade tamales with the abuelas and the moms who were all preparing everything in the kitchen. And then they came out and they guided us through this amazing tamale making experience, blending the corn and then smoothing the corn into these open hojas and these beautiful smooth green leaves, and tying them up perfectly and then cooking them. And then we got to eat them with these gorgeous homemade salsas. We got to make cacao using ancient Aztec tool called a molenillo, which basically you just rub between your two hands, and the bottom has these really like intricate, gorgeous designed wooden pieces that blends and mixes up the cacao, and you have to do it really fast and really vigorous. And every time like a gringo does it, they're like, you are not strong enough for this. And it makes you realize how we really don't have the skills to make handmade cacao. We are excellent texters. Making salsas. Have you seen someone use a molcajete before? This is why Mexican food is so good, because everything is made by hand. Everything is chopped and blended and spun and just made with time and love and patience. And then we did this really fabulous mezcal tasting. This indigenous woman who came and introduced us to her mezcal line, and we got to try everything. It was divine. And before the sun went down, we all went to the cemetery where the guy who was hosting us, his father had been buried at the cemetery, and he had a beautiful tomb, and we got to decorate his tomb. So we took all the flowers that we picked from the marigold fields, and we designed this beautiful arch, and we were all working together, and there was this little 4-year-old girl there who was helping us, and it was just really precious. So we were all in the sunlight in the cemetery, hand weaving these marigolds, sharing stories, and getting to commemorate this man's father in a really special way. And I think that just gets me. It gets me every time, because I just don't know where else you get to do stuff like this. And I'm not that well traveled. There's many countries I have yet to go to, and not many death rituals that I've been to. But I found it so indicative of how open-hearted Mexicans are, because to me this is such a personal thing to decorate one's tombstone and to invite a bunch of strangers who paid to have this experience could be seen as kind of transactional. And I think what it actually is inviting people to honor this man and to think of our own ancestors and put our own memories into this moment, and to not necessarily have it be so black and white as, you didn't know this man, why are you decorating his headstone? It was like, well, we all know someone like him, and we've all lost someone. So putting that energy into a creation that we do together to commemorate and to honor is really symbolic of honoring everyone. It really felt that way. So we finish decorating, we go back to the house, and then we start to get ready for the night. Some of the young girls in the family come and they do our Katrina makeup. I've been told is kind of can be seen as appropriation, and not necessarily something that as an outsider you need to be doing, is dressing up as a Katrina. Our intentions were very pure, and we wanted to honor Dia de Muertos, and we wanted to have this full experience. We wanted to dress up. We wanted to feel connected. So we went the whole 9 yards, and we had fabulous makeup done, and we had, these really fun outfits, and we had marigold coronas, crowns, and we felt so spirited and so connected. And we were really grateful for that. And so finally, after sipping, too many mezcals, we make our way to the cemetery, and we go to the tombstone, and we get to light the candles, and we get to have a toast with our group. If you go around like 9, 10, 11, it's still really touristy, and people are there. The panteones are open to everyone. But our guide said, it's better if we show up later. It's a little more intimate, and kind of the tourists have left, and it's mostly, people who are like really remembering their families and really having some special moments. So we said, okay, absolutely, yes, let's do it your way. So we meet up with Jack and Steph, and we're at the cemetery, and we got to go to another cemetery first, and that place was wild. It was like one of the oldest cemeteries in Oaxaca City. Tombstones literally were coming out of the ground. It looks like there's like a hand or a spirit like bursting through the earth. And I mean, we had to watch where we were walking. The earth had been, erupted almost. It was like erupting almost. It was really cool. And everybody was out and people are very respectful and they're walking slowly. And it's like a balance of people, having these moments of contemplation and celebration. And then we go to the main cemetery where we meet Jack and Steph. Jack's so funny. He had got a bottle of mezcal. Yeah, he loves mezcal as much as I do. Jack and Steph got their faces painted as well. And, we're walking through this cemetery and it's the middle of the night. And we end up walking until 4 in the morning. We experiencing this place. Now, just imagine, you're walking through. It's a dark night. There's no artificial lights except for the glow of the candles and the votives laid across every tombstone. And some of them are so spectacular. I remember this one was completely covered in flowers, marigolds and the terciopelos, these velvety red ones, and little votives placed between each flower, and the petals are glistening, and there's a palero in front that's burning copal and smoking up, so you have this beautiful balance of golden light and sensual smoke. And then if you're paying respects to the tombstone, someone might walk over and offer you a pour of mezcal, and you offer them a pour if you have some. Lightly ask who they're honoring tonight, and they tell you. And sometimes they say it with tears in their eyes, and sometimes they say it with pride and air of remembrance. You'll go over to the next tombstone, and it will be a guy completely blacked out, slumped over with an empty bottle of mezcal in his hand. Oh, and you just don't know if this person was remembering someone and just couldn't help but drink themselves into a stupor, or maybe he just had a drinking problem. Like, you really don't know, and it really didn't matter. And then there were three guys playing instruments, and they were jamming this amazing Mexican songs, which I don't know what they were, but they were so good and so spirited. And young men dressed in traditional mariachi outfits, giving Stephanie a wink and flirting with us girls. And then, we'd all share a mezcal, and Jack was so great. He was, pouring everybody shots. And they say tequila is to wake the living and mezcal is to wake the dead. And so you're out in the cemetery drinking the spirit that warms you from the inside, but also gets you a little lightheaded and a little more, just a little more available, a little loose, and say brings you a little bit closer to that veil between to the mortal world, to the spirit world. And Mel is very magical and very witchy, and so we both were feeling so moved by this energy of not only our ancestors but also so aware of our lived experience. And we just were so deep in gratitude and really conscious of how we were invited into other people's experiences. It was very special, very memorable. We closed the night at 4 a.m. and then the next day we kept our marigold crowns on. Put your marigold crowns in the fridge and they'll last longer. And we got to see all the iconic landmarks of Oaxaca. They take arena or sand and they create these gorgeous sand murals that you can walk through. And yeah, there's giant alebrijes and there's amazing comparsas in the street. We went out the next night with some of Steph's family and we got to the neighborhood Haladlaco, and there was this awesome Mexican punk band playing on the roof of a house, and we just hung out there and vibed out. And so I closed that trip feeling really satisfied that I got to experience Dia de Muertos, but I also had this sense of, okay, I want to experience a little bit more of the local experience. What if I wasn't a tourist? What are the kinds of things I would do? Who would I do it with? You got to be invited to the cookout. So the next year I'm living in Oaxaca. This is last year, 2024, and the season comes around. I had already been in Oaxaca for 6 months, and what was so funny is I actually had booked my tickets to not be there for Dia de Muertos, which once I told a friend there, they said, "What are you okay? Are you well? Do you want to check your fever? Do you need to go to the farmacia? Are you estás bien?" And I was like, no, obviously. So I changed my plans and I stayed for Dia de Muertos. And I'm so glad I did because that being a really unexpected experience. So my friend Fernando connected me to a woman, Megan, who runs this very cool space in Oaxaca City called Soltera. And it's kind of a boutique hotel and it's only for women and it's so beautifully designed. And she also has a bar downstairs and she's a mixologist. Her whole brand is to bring women together in safe and creative environments, but to also include the women in the community. She plans these beautiful cultural events, and I knew that this would be a special one. And so I booked the experience with her, and I didn't ask that many questions. I just knew that I wanted to get out of town because it was in a pueblito far away. She puts us in a shuttle, and we head out to Chichicapam and San Antonin, which are little pueblitos way outside of Oaxaca City. Now, Oaxaca is massive. It's one of the largest states in Mexico, I'm pretty sure. And so these pueblitos are very old school, for lack of a better term. So when you go to these towns, you are stepping into a rural and absolutely not commercialized environment, which is exactly why Megan brought us there. So we first go to Chichipam to visit. Her name is Angelica Garcia Vasquez. And from what I remember, her father was the maestro de mezcal at this palenque for a long time until he passed and she took over the traditional practice. And they make ancestral mezcal, which is very different than your commercially produced mezcal. There are so many steps to this process. I've gotten to see this at many different palenques over the years. And mostly, I would say from what I know, I would say the biggest difference is that everything is done by hand. So for example, in order to smash the agave to release all the sugars before they cook it, instead of using a machine to smash, they actually use donkeys or horses and they tie. This is probably a PETA red flag, but they and that pulls the stone that then crushes the agave as they walk in circles until that process is done. They use clay pots to distill the agave, which, you know, whiskey, wine, it's so much to do with what it's sitting in. So when it's sitting in this clay, man-made material, it's going to have a very different flavor than sitting in, a metal vat. And I think the production of ancestral mezcal is so much smaller than commercial. Of course, of course, right? They can only produce so many batches and it's only distributed to a certain amount of people. But that was where we started our experience and it was so much fun. And we got to meet the maestra and she took us through the whole process and she showed us this gorgeous art wall. I learned about Maya Huel. I knew of her a little bit, but getting to experience it in this tiny little town beneath the stars with this woman guiding us through was so much more memorable. So Maya Well is the Mexica goddess of of maguey, which is the agave, and she is also associated with fertility, abundance. And she was portrayed in this gorgeous space where it was all a lot of women working and managing this palenque. So you just felt this really strong appreciation for women who are in a male dominated industry and who are just as capable. And I would say, if not, more capable. Like, I'm sorry, we're life givers. We make things. That's what we do. So to have a woman making your mezcal is por favor, quiero uno más. So we got a little tipsy. We also got to make tortillas with the fam. I am such a little güera turista sometimes, and I wanted them to show me how to make the tortillas by hand. So they let me jump into their very efficient tortilla making process and completely fuck up the flow. And got to learn how to press the tortillas with the plastic on each side, and you have to like press it pretty strong and then to transfer it to the comal. And I could not figure that part out, but I have to say I think I could do it. I think if they brought me back, I could really prove myself this time. And then we layered it with Oaxacan cheese and salsas and frijoles. And yes, chef's kiss. We all got a few bottles of souvenirs to go. And we head on out to the comparsa in San Antonin. And we go with the maestra and some of her family, and then our little group. But our group was so small, like 6 or 7 in total. It was very chill. And we go and we're in the middle of absolute nowhere. I mean, there's no light posts except for right in this little pueblo center. We start to see the crowds gathering on the street corners, and I definitely stand out because it's a few Americans and I think a couple Europeans, and I think I'm another Mexican woman. So we clearly don't live in San Antonin. We are visitors for the night. So once the energy starts gathering, we figure out, okay, this is where it's happening. This is where, they're going to start the comparsa to take you to the Panteon, the cemetery. And I remember looking over to this really cool guy in a leather jacket with a rabbit's tail tied to the back of it, and this really funky leather hat with animal skin and animal fur. And he is the Joven. He is going to be the one to carry the torito until I think he passes it on to someone else. Instead of just seeing him light up the fireworks and run down the street, he had a whole ceremony prepared. And what I do know is that the burning of the torito symbolizes burning and letting go, and just reinforces this idea of, with death comes life. So he hoists it on his shoulders, he lights it up, and he starts spinning, and the fireworks start going, and everybody's cheersing, and people are dancing down by his feet, and everybody's faces are lit up. So there's probably, 20 people on each side. So it did feel very intimate, and we're all rubbing shoulders and, knocking mezcal bottles, and we're all slowly just making our way. And, people are asking us where we're from, and, being super open and connecting. And then sometimes someone will throw candy up and all the kids will run out and catch it. And it's such a cool group of elderly and young kids and families and lovers out. And I end up connecting with the son of the maestra, who was really cute. We're sharing mezcal, and he's telling me about his traditions, a million questions I'm asking him, and I'm just tipsy at this point. So I'm like, why not? I should have a date on Dia de Muertos, the son of the maestra. Okay, this man is like bred from mezcal, like, por favor. So we're just having the best time. What's so fun is some people are getting really drunk, and this one guy has this amazing leather bag for his mezcal bottle, and he's pouring shots. And you don't really say no when someone offers you a shot. So we're just cheersing to everyone and anyone. Everyone's doors are open to their houses, so you can kind of like stop in and wave. And, people are preparing meals and doing their own thing, but it's very much everyone's connected to this ritual in some way. And so finally, stumbling through the streets, flirting with my new crush, we end up making it to the Pantheon and getting to see the beauty of the Pantheon, which of course I had experienced in Oaxaca City, but I got to do it here, and it was really, really lovely. And it was quiet, and people were admiring other people's headstones, and there was this really kind of just very, very tranquilo energy. It didn't feel like anything crazy. But I do remember this young man who, I can't remember his name, but he was telling me about, the people that he's lost, and, who he's had to say goodbye to, and, getting very emotional about it, but also saying, but how wonderful it is that they're here tonight with us. What a gift it is to be experiencing life with those that we miss so much. And I just remember thinking, wow, it really is that simple sometimes, is just remembering that these people are not gone. They come to visit us, but it's really important that we make space for them. It's so easy to forget. We live our lives, we're busy, we're occupied with what's coming next, we're stressed about what happened yesterday, we're living in the past and anxious for the future, and vice versa. And at some point we just have to remember. And those spirits, those family members, those friends, those loved ones that we've lost are a memory away. And I love this idea of setting an altar and inviting them in to come sit with you. And it can be as simple as that. And I just would invite everyone to make an altar at some point, and they do this all over Asia, right? You'll be walking through Thailand and you'll see an altar at the nail store or the massage shop, and it will be, these little figurines and a half drunk glass of wine and, a candle that, doesn't light anymore. And those are ofrendas. Those are the places where we say, come back. Like, we remember you. We have space for you here. So once we walk through the cemetery, we come out to this big crowd right outside the edge of the cemetery. So church, people are going to pay their respects and to honor. And then literally 2 steps outside, you have a raucous group of people getting so lit. Have like 2 or 3 toritos blazing away, spitting fire, running in circles. And these guys are so young. Like, I swear that by the further the night goes on, the younger these guys get who are carrying these toritos. And then they have these giant puppets on sticks. They have ghosts and calaveras, super heavy, and these little Mexicans are carrying them. So I'm like, oh, that looks pretty easy. And someone hands me one to dance with. And so I take it and so I hoist it over my head. And then I start, like, doing my little twerk, doing my little dance, shaking the puppet, getting it going. And after a couple seconds, I was like, I got to put this down. And they're like, no, no, no. Like, you got to go all around. You got to make your rounds with this thing. I'm just getting my arm workout and I'm running in circles and I'm having the best time. And I pass the puppet to someone else. And I mean, everybody wants everybody to be having fun. It's just this really like mutual excitement. And nobody cares that we're not from there. Nobody cares that it's our first time visiting this town or that we might not know the whole history of all of these celebrations, but we are welcomed in like we are family. And I end up walking back to the shuttle hand in hand with my little new friend and just having this little tipsy mezcal middle school romance for the night. And then we get back onto the shuttle, and I remember talking to this girl, Gabby, for 3 hours straight, just high on mezcal, high on vibes. And we talked about, our grandparents who had passed and all these moments of just remembering, why we're here and where we come from. I came off that experience feeling so grateful for both my Dia de Muertos experiences, and this year I'm in the city and it's going to be completely different. I'm in the concrete jungle. But it will be great. I mean, the whole Reforma is lit up right now. They have comparsas every day. People are dressed up in costumes. They also celebrate Halloween here really big. So someone even asked me, they said, what do you like better, Halloween or Dia de Muertos? And I said, I've been celebrating Halloween for 30 years. I've always loved Halloween. I'm like, give me an excuse to dress up, put on a costume, get creative. Love that. I always was the one to host Halloween parties in college. It was the best. Cobwebs everywhere and dry ice and specialty cocktails and black lights and fake blood. I love it. I am here for the rituals. I am here to honor and remember and to put together and to create just this portal to connect with spirits. Like, are you kidding? It's the witches' season. Let's go. So that's really why I'm in Mexico. I'm not here to put on a wig and dress up. As fun as that is, I really feel moved to be connected to more of the traditions. So my goal is to go out with some locals and see the holiday through their eyes, of course, and then to also maybe go to a pantheon or a cemetery to remember the lives of those who have passed. Just to delineate a little bit between the contemporary Dia de Muertos and the indigenous Zapotec traditions is to know that the Zapotecs celebrate on October 30th and 31st, not on the 1st and 2nd, which is when they meet with their deceased loved ones. And they would be received with enthusiasm and the fruits of the harvest. Literally, they would put out the fruits and the breads and all the abundance from their agricultural harvest that season. The underworld is one of 3 parts of the Zapotec universe, along with the sky and the earth. So, of course, they're very elemental. And so I think we see the elements in the altars We have the earth, which in the form of fruits, vegetables, and of course the flowers. You have the wind in the burning copal. You have the water. You have water glasses and spirits and mezcal. And you have fire in the forms of the candles. So, which I think is so interesting because I never had that growing up in my Catholic faith. In the church, we didn't have that kind of ritual around meeting those who have gone. There was more of it was super sad and depressing. We wear black and we say goodbye forever, and it's soul aching, gut wrenching feeling because there's this true, really, this is what I remember about the Catholic funerals and rituals, is that it is a goodbye. It is a, you are gone, you are not here, and I am left with this void. And it's tragic, and it's truly this heartbreaking experience. And what I just value so much about Dia de Muertos here is that there is a conversation with the deceased. There is this super potent connection that is not goodbye, but look forward to seeing you in another form. I look forward to having you back, each season, celebrating, like being so thankful for what was and not heartbroken for what isn't. Um, and of course it's a goodbye because you won't have that person in your life in that same way. But, I found new ways to connect with my grandmother, my grandfather, with all my grandparents who have passed, my cousins, my uncles, my aunts. We've had so much loss in my family, and it feels so. It feels like such a privilege to be able to make space for them to come and visit. And I look forward to meeting them in Mexico. What better? And I know that they'll visit me in Mexico. I mean, who doesn't want to come here? So I wrote a little something last year that I will read to you now to close this episode. I remember last year during Dia de Muertos in Oaxaca City. To experience the holiday in the center of Oaxaca is to walk through crowded streets choked with festivals, music, Katrina costumes, young men painted as skeletons, and marigolds crowning every business and bar. It is hectic with a thoughtful undertone of spiritual remembrance, but the practice of welcoming the spirits can be lost amidst the parties and the consumerism. So I decided to escape the beautiful and heavily traveled streets adorned with tourists and head beyond the city's limits to discover rituals that are done in the privacy of small towns lit only by stars. So we went to the pueblitos of Chichicapam and San Antonin, where an intimacy is invoked throughout the panteons, comparsas, street fairs, and distinct melodies that move the spirits. Mexicans' dedication to the dead is a deep reminder to dance for those who can't, to carry a bone-deep gratitude, and to laugh at the dark humor that narrates the circus of life. This prose is an homage to the Oaxacans who showed me their hearts this season. Marigolds, they glitter the earth like handprints, gold petals placed in your memory in the form of floral crucifixes, instruments, and saints. Breathe in the sweet scent of a cracked Victoria, nueces by the handful, and pan de muertos to call you home. As the harvest moon lifts its chin, your path becomes lit, warmed by the lunar grandmother in the dead of night. I feel your spirit, a whisper in the leaves, a chill behind the knees. Mezcal, translucent, slippery, and smoky, coats the throats of the skin-bound lovers that sing to your headstone. In between copas sipped and swallowed, there is ache for your appearance. Find us with your eyes closed, the texture of Tio's leather jacket, the charred tortillas on Abuela's comal and Primo's whip that snares and snaps in the street for the comparsa that gathers us here tonight. A brass band, a blazing torito. Amidst the celebratory sounds and wails of our hearts, can you see your profile reflected in our eyes? A chiseled face that used to fill the silence we now pray to. Feliz Dia de Muertos. Ciao for now.